Happy Mother's Day. So before we get started, I just wanted to point out how everything kind of comes in full circle. My first sermon here, I was using she or her pronouns for God, if anyone remembers. And for some, it was very liberating, and others, it may have been a little uncomfortable. But now my last sermon here for the year, I'm preaching on Mother's Day. And this is probably the time when we will most see ourselves in God. And I hope today that you can think a little bit back about that and how maternal God can be. So with that being said, the gospel today comes from the book of John. It speaks of Christ's final commandment. Love each other as I have loved you. Jesus is setting the standard for all people. If I can love you regardless of everything you do, you can love your neighbor. Right? So while meditating on this text, I began to think to myself, who can actually do this? Who can achieve this kind of love? Who do you know in this present world that would lay down their life for you in an act of steadfast love? What does that even look like? Well, it looks like a mother's love. That's the first person that comes to mind when I think, who would lay down their life for me? Whether that's physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, it's my mother. And now I truly believe that on this earth, the closest thing we will have to experiencing God's love is a mother's love. And that's called agape in Greek. Now today we're all going to become linguists, so bear with me. But I just want to break down, you see, the Greeks have a really interesting way of explaining themselves, expressing themselves. Love, for example, they have 4 different words for it. You have eros, which is a more mature love. You have philia, which is a brotherly love, a fraternal love, a love you have for your comrades. And you have storge. And storge is like a parental love, but it's actually not even used that much when you look at text. And then there's agape. Agape love. It's a God-like love. It's God's love. So that's the kind of love we're going to look at today. God's love. So remember that word, agape, right? But today I'm going to kind of go a little off the text, and I want to actually take you on a bit of a tour through Hebrew culture, through Hebrew text. And I want you to really see how important motherhood is. I don't think we talk about that enough. So while I was reading the book of Lamentations, for anyone who's read it, there's a lot of personification of the city Jerusalem in a very maternal way. And I found this word, rahum, Hebrew. So rahum is the word we're looking at. And the way that you transliterate, the way you figure out what each word is when going from Hebrew to English, you find the root. So the root is an R, a heavy H, and an M. This is important, I swear. So as I'm going through my Hebrew lexicon and I'm looking, I find the word raham. And that means womb. Right? That's not the word I was looking for. But it was interesting because it's the same root. The word I was looking for, as I said, is rahum. Rahum is actually an adjective. It means compassionate. It means tender-hearted. How incredible is it that within the Hebrew language, the woman's anatomy is linguistically connected to an empathetic emotion. Think about that. Racham, no, I mean rachum, same thing, you know? So something else I learned when I was going through the Hebrew is that there's Isha and Nashim, which is the singular and plural for the word woman. I know this is a lot of language right now, but you guys are going to be excellent at this later, I swear. Now, when I read it, it reads woman, but there's actually a double meaning to that. It also means wife. It's used interchangeably in the Bible. So you see someone's Isha, someone's woman, someone's wife. And if we know anything about Hebrew culture, you're not just a wife, you're a mother. That is, you don't just get married to be married. You get married because you're having a family. So when you see Isha, when you see Nashim, you're immediately thinking of woman, wife, mother. So there's actually a whole thing in Proverbs 31, verse 10 through 31, and it's called Tova Isha, which is the good wife, the good woman, the good mother. And I bring this up to you because in it, there's all these standards, these expectations of what it means to be a mother. According to it, the good wife is expected to be financially stable without her partner's help, able to cultivate the land, to be aware of the marketplace so she knows what is a reasonable price to sell her own goods. The good wife is supposed to be able to take care of herself independently, all while raising her children. These are literally the standards. Not much has really changed. So church, if you had to work a full-time job and make sure your kids were fed, can I get a thank you, Jesus? Yes, yes. Now, if your mother was one of those people saying thank you, Jesus, can I get a thank you, mama? Thank you, mom. Do you know how much love one must have in their hearts to be a good wife and mother? I don't think we recognize this. Your capacity to love is significant because the task, the job of being a mother, is committing one's life to another human being with the intention that they will one day grow up and be a decent human being. That is the goal set for you. That is the standard right there. I'm going to raise these children, and I hope that they turn out halfway decent. Because ultimately, there's no formula to get the ideal child. I swear, if there was, but there's no formula for that. There's no way you say, all right, well, if I make sure they go dance class 4 times a week up until 10, if I get them into basketball practice, if they take all the AP courses, they're going to all be lawyers. That's it. We would have a community of lawyers. Now imagine God as a spiritual parent who adopted the Israelites and made them God's children. God provided them everything they needed to be decent human beings. God gave them prophets. God gave them the commandments. God gave them wars, liberation. God said, literally, here's Jesus. Take him. Use him. Be a good person. And still, we find ourselves messing up. All of this is done with the intentions for us to do the bare minimum of loving each other the way God has loved them. And when we think about everything we've been given, oftentimes we tend to mess that up. When we think back to the Israelites, you were given Jesus and they were like, well, let him die on the cross, I guess. We let Jesus suffer on the cross when we turn ourselves away from God, from our neighbors, from our parents. We allow that to happen rather than being the reason why Jesus rose. Does that make sense? Okay.